Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond, where every story touches your heart and leaves a lasting impact. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our journey of emotional, motivational, and soul-stirring tales that stay with you forever. The warm rays of the setting sun streamed softly through the window panes as Emma stood silently at the threshold of her new home, her delicate fingers clutching the edge of her bridal dupatta. Her heart was full of dreams of love, acceptance, and a family that would become her own. Her husband Liam, whom she had married only a week ago, had been kind, though quiet. She hoped that in time, love would blossom naturally between them. But the warmth she hoped to feel in the household was already missing. The air around her mother-in-law, Mrs. Thompson, was cold and tight, as if always bracing for something to criticize. From the very first morning, nothing Emma did seemed good enough. The tea was too strong. The food was too bland. Her laugh was too loud. Her silence too suspicious. She smiled, she was showing off. She didn't smile, she was disrespectful. Each step she took felt like she was walking on cracked glass. But Emma, brought up to be kind and patient, kept her hurt folded neatly in the creases of her heart and continued to serve with love and humility. One evening, as Emma was setting the table for dinner, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was an unknown number. She wiped her hands quickly and answered. A man's voice spoke politely, asking if she was Emma Carter. When she said yes, he explained that he was calling regarding the student loan she had inquired about months ago, before marriage. She thanked him and told him she would call back later. But she was unaware that Mrs. Thompson had heard a portion of the conversation from the hallway, and that was all the fuel her suspicions needed. That night, in front of Liam and the rest of the family, Mrs. Thompson's voice echoed sharply through the living room. So this is what you've been doing? Chatting secretly with strange men on the phone while we feed you under our roof. Emma's eyes widened in shock. She tried to explain, but the words felt small and powerless against the storm that followed. She stammered that it was about a student loan she had wanted to take before marriage, that she hadn't told anyone because she wasn't planning to use it now. But her words were lost in the tide of accusation and judgment. Liam stood there frozen, torn between his mother's rage and the woman he had promised to protect. He didn't say a word. Not to defend, not to question, not even to console. Emma's chest felt heavy, but her eyes remained dry. Deep inside, something began to shift, not just the weight of false blame, but the painful realization that the people who were supposed to stand by her didn't even want to hear her. And in that moment, as the dinner table remained untouched and the room filled with cold silence, Emma understood that love was not always enough. That sometimes, silence screams louder than any accusation. That night would change the course of her life, and none of them could have guessed just how strong that quiet girl would become. If this story has touched your heart so far, don't forget to subscribe to Storytelling and Beyond for more powerful and emotional journeys like this. The morning after the stormy accusations, Emma sat alone in the corner of the guest room, where she had been asked to sleep for the night. Her suitcase was already placed beside her, half-packed by her mother-in-law in a fury that left no room for conversation. The echo of last night's insults still rang in her ears, and Liam's silence had cut deeper than any cruel word. Her mind wrestled with questions she didn't dare voice. How could this happen so fast? Wasn't love supposed to protect you? Mrs. Thompson entered the room abruptly, her arms crossed tightly, her eyes full of cold judgment. Your ride will be here soon. I've already informed your uncle. This house is not for girls who bring shame. Emma opened her mouth, trying once again to explain, but Mrs. Thompson raised a hand. Don't even try. If Liam won't say it, I will. We can't afford this drama. We're not fools. Emma stood slowly, still dressed in her soft peach nightwear, her eyes calm but determined. I never brought shame, she said gently. I came here with love, but maybe that wasn't enough for you. Mrs. Thompson looked away, visibly unmoved. Moments later, Emma walked out the front door, not with anger or drama, but with quiet grace. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She simply picked up her small bag and walked toward the gate, her heart heavy but her spirit refusing to break. Her uncle, Mr. Harold Bennett, was waiting in his car. A kind man in his 60s, Harold had raised Emma like his own after her parents passed away. The moment he saw her walking alone with a suitcase in hand, his brows furrowed. He got out of the car swiftly and walked up to her. "Emma? What happened?" he asked gently, looking behind her for someone, anyone, who might stop her. But the door remained closed. She gave a weak smile and shook her head. "Let's just go home, Uncle." On the way back, Harold didn't press her. He knew Emma well. She would speak when she was ready. Instead, he made a quiet stop at a small diner. They sat in a corner booth. He ordered 2 teas. And only then did she speak, softly, tearlessly, but with truth. She explained the phone call. The accusations. Liam's silence. Mrs. Thompson's rage. And how she had been sent away without a single attempt to understand her side of the story. Mr. Bennett listened carefully, occasionally nodding, his hands folded tightly. "You did nothing wrong," he said after a long pause. "And I'm proud of you, for holding yourself with grace in the face of so much hurt." Emma looked down at her tea, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. "It hurts more that he didn't say anything. I wasn't expecting him to fight for me, but I thought he'd at least ask me what happened." Mr. Bennett reached out, placing a hand over hers. "Sometimes silence speaks the loudest truths. But remember, your worth isn't defined by how others treat you. It's defined by how you rise, even after you've been pushed." That day, as the clouds shifted gently in the sky outside, Emma made a quiet decision. She would not return to that house with apologies for things she didn't do. She would find a way to heal, and to grow stronger. She would take her pain and turn it into power. The chapter wasn't over. In fact, her story had just begun. The days at her uncle's home passed in a soft quietness, much like the calm that follows a terrible storm. Emma spent most of her time helping in the kitchen, organizing bookshelves, or tending to the garden out back. It wasn't that she was avoiding the world, it was more that she was trying to reconnect with herself. The ache in her chest hadn't vanished, but she was learning how to carry it without letting it crush her. One morning, while sorting through a box of old clothes to donate, she found her wedding dupatta folded neatly at the bottom. The soft blush fabric shimmered slightly in the sunlight streaming through the window. Her hands trembled as she held it. For a moment, she considered burying it deep in a drawer again. But instead, she took a long breath, folded it with care, and placed it in the donation pile. It was time to let go, not of the memories, but of the pain attached to them. Mr. Bennett noticed the shift in her. He saw how she walked straighter, spoke with more clarity, and began spending time on things she once loved, like writing. Emma started journaling again. Pages filled with emotions she had buried during the chaos of marriage and betrayal. In those pages, she wasn't a victim. She was a voice reclaiming its place. But healing wasn't always easy. One afternoon, while running an errand for her uncle, Emma crossed paths with an old neighbor, Mrs. Collins, a kind but notoriously talkative woman. "Oh, Emma, dear, you're back here?" "Already?" she asked, tilting her head in the kind of way that stung more than it comforted. Emma smiled politely. "Just visiting Uncle Harold for a while." Mrs. Collins didn't mean harm, but her next words dug deep. "I heard some rumors, dear. People say you were sent back. Something about cheating?" Of course, I didn't believe it. Emma stood firm, her voice steady. "People will say what they want, but the truth doesn't change. I didn't do what they accused me of." And with that, she walked away, not hurriedly, not shamefully, but with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed the world's approval. That evening, Emma returned home and added a new page to her journal. "Today, I chose to speak. Not to prove a point. Just to honor my truth." In the meantime, something unexpected stirred at Liam's end. The silence he had so confidently wrapped himself in began to haunt him. Days passed, and something didn't feel right. He kept expecting Emma to call. To beg. to defend herself. But there was nothing. No messages. No blame. Just absence. And in that quiet, Liam began to replay every moment, the trembling in her voice as she denied the accusations, the way her eyes searched his for support, and most painfully, the way she walked away without a single hateful word. It gnawed at him. What if he had been wrong? What if his silence hadn't been strength, but cowardice? Mrs. Thompson noticed her son's change. He was quieter, distracted. She chose not to comment, but deep down, she knew. The seed of doubt had been planted, and guilt was beginning to bloom. Back at Mr. Bennet's home, Emma sat under the old oak tree in the backyard, scribbling her thoughts onto fresh pages. She no longer needed closure from the people who didn't fight for her. She was building it for herself. One step at a time, she was no longer just the girl who had been cast out. She was becoming a woman rising from her own ashes. The breeze that evening carried a gentle chill, and Emma sat quietly on the bench outside her uncle's home, watching the sky shift from a soft amber to deep violet. It had been weeks since she left Liam's home. The wounds were still there, yes, but they no longer bled. They sat like old bruises on her heart, tender, but fading. Inside the house, Mr. Bennet was reading the newspaper, occasionally glancing at Emma through the open window. He had grown fond of her strength, her ability to endure pain with dignity. She rarely spoke about what happened, but her silence was loud. It carried stories of betrayal, of being misunderstood, and of resilience. Meanwhile, at Liam's house, the air was no longer peaceful. The once calm household was now filled with unease. Since Emma left, nothing felt the same. The laughter had died down, meals were quieter, and Liam had become distant. He went through the motions of daily life, but his heart was caught in a whirlwind of guilt and doubt. His mother, Mrs. Thompson, had noticed the shift but chose to ignore it at first. She believed Emma's absence was a correction of a mistake, a cleansing. But one night, while cleaning Liam's room, she accidentally came across Emma's diary. It had been packed away with some of her belongings. Curiosity got the better of her, and she began to read. What she found was not bitterness or accusation, but love. Page after page revealed a young woman trying her best to be accepted, to be kind, to be patient. Emma had written about the pain of being misunderstood, about longing for a mother's warmth, and the sadness of being falsely accused. There was even a note she had once written for Liam, never delivered, telling him how she was scared, but still hopeful, and how much she loved him despite everything. Mrs. Thompson's hands trembled. Her chest tightened with something unfamiliar, regret. That night, she sat alone in her room, unable to sleep. Emma had never raised her voice. Never blamed anyone. She had simply left. And suddenly, the accusations from the neighbor, the servant's careless words, they all felt like poison she had allowed to seep into their lives unchecked. By morning, Mrs. Thompson was a different woman. She didn't say anything to Liam immediately, but she started noticing small things, his inability to focus, his tendency to check his phone as if waiting for a message, his sighs that seemed to come from a place deeper than exhaustion. Finally, one afternoon, Liam came home early from work. He sat at the edge of his bed and held Emma's diary in his hands. He had read it too. Every word. Every line. And with each page, his shame grew. He had let her go. He hadn't defended her. He hadn't even asked her once, "Did you really do it?" He had just accepted the whispers, the assumptions, and let them define the woman he once said he loved. That night, he approached his mother. "I want to see her," he said softly. Mrs. Thompson didn't speak for a moment. Then she nodded. "You should." It wasn't easy for Liam to find Emma. She had deleted her social accounts. Her number was no longer active. But he knew her uncle's house and decided to try. When the cab stopped in front of the old house, Liam's heart thudded in his chest. What would he say? Would she even see him? He stepped out, walked to the door, and raised his hand to knock, but before he could, the door creaked open. Emma stood there. Hair tied back. a worn sweater hugging her frame, and eyes that no longer sparkled the way they once had, but held a quiet strength. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. "I don't expect forgiveness," Liam said finally, his voice low. "But I came because I should have believed you. I should have stood beside you when you needed me the most." Emma didn't respond immediately. She looked at him, trying to read the sincerity in his face. And it was there. The regret. The sorrow. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said softly. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, that's all we need, a moment of truth, and the courage to take one step toward healing. Of course. Here's scene 5 of your story in approximately 4,000 characters, ending with your YouTube channel intro and a request for subscription, as per your style. Liam sat across from Emma in the small, warmly lit living room of her uncle's house. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than ever, filling the space between them like an echo of all the words they hadn't said. Emma had offered him tea, and he had accepted, not because he wanted tea, but because it was a gesture of peace, and peace was something he hadn't felt in a long time. "I read your diary," Liam said after a long silence, his eyes lowered, almost ashamed. "I know I shouldn't have, but I wanted to understand what I lost." Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes were calm, her posture straight. "And did you?" He nodded. "Every word was a mirror I didn't want to look into. You were alone in that house, and I didn't even notice." Emma sipped her tea. "You didn't want to notice." Her words weren't harsh. They were true. Liam felt them like a soft blow to his chest, gentle but undeniable. "I don't know how to fix what I've broken," he continued, "but I want to try. If you let me." Emma looked out the window. Outside, the sun had begun to set, casting golden streaks across the sky. The light fell across her face, softening her features, as if the universe itself wanted to remind Liam of what he once had. "I'm not the same person who left your house, Liam," she said quietly. "And I don't want to be. That girl was trying too hard to be accepted. I've learned now that I don't need to beg for love or respect." Liam leaned forward. "I don't want you to beg. I want to give it freely. Not because I owe you, but because I still love you. I never stopped." Emma turned her gaze back to him. There was no smile, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a crack in the armor she had built. "You loved me?" she asked. "Then why didn't you stand by me when your mother accused me? Why didn't you fight for me when I had nowhere to go?" "I was a coward," Liam confessed, his voice breaking. "And I was wrong." A long pause followed, heavy with emotion neither of them could push away. Then Emma stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Liam thought she might be walking away from the conversation, but she returned with something in her hands, her wedding ring. She set it gently on the table in front of him. "I'm not ready to wear this again," she said softly. "But I'm also not ready to throw it away." It was the closest thing to hope Liam had felt in weeks. He stood too, not daring to touch the ring. Instead, he looked into her eyes and said, "Then I'll wait. However long it takes. I'll prove that I deserve you." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. Outside, the wind had picked up. The leaves danced along the pavement, as if celebrating a reunion the world had long hoped for. Inside, two hearts, once broken, now stood on the fragile edge of healing. Love doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers through pain, waiting for the day when both hearts are finally ready to listen. And as Liam left her house that night, he looked up at the stars, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Because some endings are just new beginnings in disguise. This was another soul-stirring tale from your favorite channel, Storytelling and Beyond. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We bring you powerful, emotional, and motivational stories that stay with you long after they end. Until next time, keep believing in the strength of love and the magic of second chances.